Good. Okay, I'm going to try recording to the cloud. Hopefully it'll work. And I'm going to share my screen. Apparently I've got a microphone issue. What does that mean? Can you guys still hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Weird. I don't know why it's telling me that. Maybe it's because it's not going to let me do, let's see, it might just be from the subtitle things. Let's see. Okay. So, welcome everyone to my little monthly lectures, which are going to be called Bitesize Birth. I've just had a lot of fun making a little logo the other day, as if I didn't have enough to do.
It's really pretty.
Thank you, thank you. So I'm really grateful that you're all here. Thank you so much for coming. And I'm really doing these for you guys. So I'd love you to let me know if there are things that you want me to cover, things that you want to learn about in the future, things that maybe you've heard that you don't really know much about or want to know more about. It doesn't have to be biomechanics related. I'm happy to talk about physiology and medical things and all that kind of stuff. So if I've got enough notice, I can research and talk about anything, and we can cover things in more detail that might be a bit confusing, or you might want to sort of talk about a little bit more. And yeah, let me know what you want from the sessions, and I'll try and send a little bit of a feedback question to you guys just so that you can let me know, or maybe you can just drop me an email to let me know what you'd like to cover, or a message, or whatever works best for you. So I'm going to record all these sessions, and then you'll have access to the sessions. If you don't want to be on the recording, obviously you can keep your video off and ask questions in the chat if you're feeling shy and you don't want to speak on camera. And if you're bringing cases to the discussion, just keep them anonymous so that we're respecting clients' privacy. Obviously, the information presented in these sessions is not intended to replace medical advice, though perhaps it can bring a point of discussion or information to bring to healthcare practitioners so that your clients can make informed decisions, and you can help them to do that. So what are we going to cover today? So I'm going to talk a little bit more about Biomechanics Pelvis Basics, go over those again for those of you who've already come to my courses, and also then we'll have a chance to discuss some cases. So maybe you guys have some things that you want to bring, and also I've had a couple of interesting cases recently that I can share with you that might be helpful for you in the future in case a similar thing comes up for you. And then I'll just give you some information very quickly on how to sign up for Bitesize Birth if you haven't already, though I know a few of you have. So. So let's start with the basics. So the pelvis is made up primarily of 3 bones. The big ones either side are the innominate bones, though a lot of people refer to them as the iliac bone.
Can I just ask you, like, would it be possible if, just to be sure, like if you can sort of guide us towards, if I hold my pelvis now, and if you can just guide us a little bit so we can have the physical touch, because that's what I feel I'm really lacking because everything was online.
Yeah, of course.
So when I am with a client, I'm not, you know, I sort of feel it out, but I'm not 100% confident because never had the actual
feeling of it.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's my camera deciding to turn itself off.
Shelley has a session on the 6th. Where is your session, Shelley? Is it in person?
I know.
Yeah, I'm doing an in-person on the 6th of December.
It's over an hour from my house.
Oh. Yeah, it's quite a way because you're in London, aren't you? So yeah. It's up in the sort of Northamptonshire. Okay, yeah. So let's have a feel. So to feel the innominate or the iliac bones, these bones at the side, the best way to do it actually is to take your hands into your waist and kind of roll them over. So I'm just going to see if I can see. Hold on, maybe actually it'll help if I stop the share so that you can see me a bit bigger. Let's see, I think if I pin me, I don't know if I pin me whether I come up big for all of you guys. I don't know if am I now the person that you can see?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
oh, perfect.
And also, I'm sorry, my microphone is a bit bad, so I'm just going to describe it and then stand up, because otherwise you might not be able to hear me. It's very directional. I need to get one that pins to me. But we're basically just going to roll our hands in over our waist, and we can feel that bony bit at the top. And when you do that, that's the top of the iliac crest. So you kind of squish your hand into the squishy bit of your side, and you'll roll in over the top of these bones, and your fingers will actually land on the topmost part of the pelvis here.
Okay.
So that's the superior iliac spines. Okay, so on me, like this. Yeah, so that's like over the squishy bit of my waist, and then my fingers come forward onto those bony bits there.
Okay.
Rolling in like that. Okay, so that is the top part of your pelvis there. Okay, so as we know, the pelvis is like a clothes peg. Yeah, if we squeeze the top part in, it opens the bottom part, and vice versa. Yeah, so if you're trying to help somebody with hip squeezes and you're squeezing those top parts, that is going to be when the baby is lower in the pelvis. Yeah, because when we squeeze there, okay, it's opening the bottom. So if the baby is still high, we don't want to squeeze this top part, because actually it's not going to help the space at the top. Yeah, it's helping to open that space at the bottom. Okay, so if the baby is higher up and the person's feeling like they need pressure, it'd actually be better to come lower down, like on the bottom cheeks, over the sitting bones here, and squeeze the bottom, or to actually just push on those sits. So on me, that's going to look like a squeeze more here, lower down, rather than up here. Lower down. There's a lower down pressure to help the opening. Or a really good one is, often people feel comfortable on all fours, you know, leaning over a wall, leaning over a sofa, or even if somebody's standing, leaning over a surface. Okay, you can come behind them and just put your hands on their sitting bones. Okay, so that's these ischial tuberosities at the bottom. So you can feel those now if you just take your hands like this and put them under your bottom. Feel the bony bits. You know, if you have a child sit on your lap and it makes your leg go to sleep, that those bony bits that are digging in, those are the ischial tuberosities, the sitting bones. Okay, so we can hold those with our hands, even especially if we're like leaning against a wall, or we can brace our arms against ourselves, and then the person can lean into us. And the good thing about that is that the pregnant person will instinctively lean in a way that's helpful for them. So for example, if they're needing a bit more space in one side of the pelvis compared to the other, they will lean back into your hand and push more to one side than the other. So they're directing the help that the physical help that they're needing from you. Yeah. Yeah, see that? Or if they're wanting to just have pressure, they'll just push back directly into you. And if you can get a wall behind you, that means that they can push quite a lot of force back into you, and that's quite easy. Otherwise, you'll need a kind of a stance where you've got one leg behind another, or maybe you're kneeling down, one knee behind another. So it's like this in a lunge. You can help them. It's quite physical to do that, but a lot easier, a lot less physical than doing a hip squeeze, for hours on end. Yeah, because forcing in like that is far more hard work on your body than resisting a push back. Yeah, so that can be really helpful. Yeah, they can push against you, Grace. Yeah, they'll lean back into you. So it's really great if you can get somewhere behind where you can lean and they can push back into you. So usually people will want this when they're on all fours. It's the best position for it, so they'll push back into your hands when they're on all fours. Yeah, and it is easier than doing this hip squeeze from the side. Okay. Yeah, so the other bones, try to feel you're feeling everyone's ischial spines. Yeah, it's good, just get people to sit on your hands. You've probably got to be a bit friendly with them, excuse me, can you just sit on my hands? This bone here, this big triangular bone, this is the sacrum. Okay, Yeah, and then at the bottom of the sacrum, we've got the coccyx. Okay, which also, so they both move. So the coccyx moves a little bit, and also the sacrum moves a little bit. And depending which way the sacrum moves, it's either going to make more space at the inlet coming in, okay? So when it tips this way, which is a movement called counternutation, it opens the space front to back in the inlet. Yeah, you don't need, that's okay not to squeeze the bones, Grace, that's fine. Yeah, when you're pushing back, it's really more not like squeezing in is difficult, and actually trying to open the inlet by squeezing in is not very effective. You're not going to make a huge amount of difference by squeezing the ischial tuberosities. It's better pushing backwards than the person directing the push. There goes my camera again. You love it. These things always just break right at the wrong moment. What was I saying? Yeah, so actually to make space at the inlets, the way to make the most space at the inlet really is going to be more about this movement of the sacrum rather than trying to move the innominate bones a huge amount. Okay, we can a little bit with certain movements, and those certain movements are really going to be more things that we're doing with the legs. Yeah. So if we are externally rotating the legs, so we're taking the knees outwards, okay, that is going to, what that's going to do is, because the hips come into here, that is going to take the ilia out this way. So you're going to get a kind of movement like this. It's like flaring. It's not a huge amount of space, but it might just be enough, might be a few millimeters enough to make a difference. Okay, and definitely when we're trying to help at the outlet, when we do an internal rotation, so we're taking the knees inwards and the feet out, that can make quite a significant difference to the outlet by doing this. Okay, I actually heard about a case recently where a mother was struggling to push for 2 hours at home. They transferred into the hospital, and on the way the doula said, can we try something? And they were like, yeah, sure. And so she just helped the mum to find internal rotation, asked her if she was okay to do it, to be comfortable with her legs, and the baby came out in 2 pushes and saved them from having the cesarean. So it can, you can try something even at the last minute. It can just be the thing that makes the difference. So if you want to feel on your ischial tuberosities, so sit on your sitting bones and then feel what happens when you go into internal rotation and then external rotation. Yeah, you can feel that it changes the space.
What would the mom say that she feels to sort of give you a clue that that's the time to do that in that rotation?
Well, I think the thing is with as I said to you in before, we really don't want to be interfering if everything's going well. So you don't need to do anything if things are going well, but what you can do is, with your knowledge, look and build up your knowledge base of where women might be in labor. So they're going to instinctively go into postures that make more space if they need it. Yeah, so when a baby's trying to get in, so the inlet of the pelvis, so the baby's trying to get in here, what people are going to be trying to do is either orient the baby so that they can come in, a bit like, those games that you have a little ball in a maze. Yeah, so this is my little pelvis. So if you've got the ball in the maze and it's like swirling around, and then you can drop through the hole. Yeah. Just lost my ball now, so I can't show you that again. But yeah, that movement can help the baby to find space to get in. So they might be here and they're just, moving the hips around and around, just might help them drop down like a coin around one of those swirly things. Okay, or the mother's going to be instinctively doing movements to try and nod this sacrum out of the way. So it's going to try and bring this promontory, which is getting in the way of the baby getting in, trying to bring it back. So trying to go into that it's called counternutation movement. Okay, so but of course the sacrum is attached to the spine. Okay, so that means that she might be doing movements with her spine, backwards and forwards, or she's going to be trying to really move the ilia of the pelvis. Okay, so the sacrum's pretty fixed, but she can rock her ilia backwards and forwards, and you can see if the sacrum's fixed but the ilia are moving, that's going to alter that space. So often women will be doing backwards and forwards movements. Okay, so maybe on a ball. Hi, Blue. Yeah, or arching the pelvis. Yeah, so you probably see things like
Yeah.
this kind of instinctive movement, or sitting on a ball and doing circles. Yeah, or bouncing up and down. Yeah, we don't tend to be bouncing up and down on a birth ball when a baby's lower in the pelvis. Yeah, it's usually when the baby's at the end. So you can watch for these clues to give you an idea of where the baby is. There goes the camera again. Oh, and I'm back. Yeah, so okay, I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
So if I just share this again for a moment. Okay, so we've got the ilia and the sacrum and the coccyx. So the places that we're thinking about really in the pelvis are where movement is difficult for the baby to get through, the tightest spaces. So we've got this inlet at the top of the pelvis, and as I said, that nodding of the sacrum is what helps to increase that front to back diameter. We can change the side to side a little bit, but not as much as that front to back movement. Then we've got the middle of the pelvis where these pointy bits are, which are called the ischial spines. So this is at the level of the pelvic floor. So it's where the baby needs to make a rotation so that they can then be facing front to back, because that's the largest diameter for them to be able to fit through. They also need to turn there so that they can then go from a flexed position where they're presenting that small tiny part of their head to being able to extend their head to come around the pubic arch to come out at the outlet at the bottom. Yeah. So so we can see those three levels here. So the inlet is in red, the mid pelvis is in green, and then the outlet is in purple. Yeah, so the movements to help the baby through at those different points are different. And between the inlet and the outlet, they're basically the opposite movements because we're wanting the sacrum to do the opposite thing. And at the mid pelvis, it's actually really more about shifting the pelvis side to side asymmetrically. Yeah, we've got somebody else joining us. Okay. Which is, hi Joan. She can't hear me yet. Just connecting to audio. Which is why it's more important for us to understand where the baby is in the pelvis than understanding how dilated the cervix is, because the dilation of the cervix is kind of irrelevant to the progress of the labor. Okay, it's more about where is the baby. So if there's a delay or there's discomfort, we know that we can help them where they are. So often when a baby's stuck at the inlet, I'm just going to stop sharing so that you can see my pelvis a bit more. So when a baby's stuck at the inlet, oh, there goes my camera again. Annoying. Is it going to stop entirely? Is it going to work? Oh no, that might be it. Oh no, it's back. honestly don't know if it's the cable on my computer. Yeah, so when the baby's trying to get into the inlet, okay, often in terms of the mum to help the space, we need to do this movement. So we need to counter-nutate sacrum, or if we're thinking of that sacrum being fixed, what we're trying to do is tilt the pelvis forward. Okay. And that's why the Walters is effective, because it's doing a forward tilt of the pelvis. Yeah. So it's moving the sacrum back out of the way and opening the space here. The other thing that we're trying to do is to help the baby to tuck, so that they're then presenting that smaller part of their head rather than the large part of the head if they're extended. So that's what we're trying to do with the movements. We're trying to help the baby to tuck, help the baby to turn, so that they're facing in a way that they get the most space. Okay, and often that just takes time. Yes, Sally, absolutely. And abdominal lift and tuck is the perfect thing to help with that. But really, with an abdominal lift and tilt, we want to know that the baby's in a good position before we do that. Yeah, because if the baby's back to back and we do an abdominal lift and tilt, what it can mean is that it just helps the baby just to drop into the pelvis, and then they drop in back to back, and then they're inside the pelvis and they've obviously got less space. It's a bit more tricky for them to turn around, so it can take a bit of a longer time. So actually we really want to be sure the baby's on that left hand side before we do that. And you can do that with the help of a midwife, obviously, if you're in a hospital. Actually, you could have a go yourself at having a look. And often the easiest way is to get a mum to lay back like in a semi-reclined position and look at them from the feet end. Okay, because first of all, you can see which side of the abdomen the baby's on. And because I'm just going to try putting this baby on my jumper if my camera keeps working. Gosh, it's driving me crazy. It'll just turn itself off. It didn't even disconnect there.
Shall you just repeat that last sentence? I was when the mom's lying, yeah,
lying down, you go at the feet end, and you can see when you've got a baby in a tummy.
Okay. Yeah.
You see a bulge more one side than the other.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my baby's escaping. Yeah. So you can actually see that if you look at the feet from the feet, you can actually see, and you can have a feel. You know, you can have a feel, and the mum can have a feel. Ask her where's she feeling kicking. Yeah, usually if babies are on the left hand side, what the mum will feel is kicking up in the ribs on the right. Yeah, they'll get kicking there. If the baby's back to back, they'll feel lots of movement at the front. Yeah, because the feet and will be doing lots of things, and it'll be quite central, the feeling. Okay, so then we wouldn't really want to do an abdominal lift and tilt. We want to encourage the baby to turn then. So, you know, in that case, something like a forward leaning inversion or a knee chest position with some nice rocking, jiggling of the pelvis is going to be more helpful, because it's going to release the lower uterine ligaments to make more space for the baby to be able to turn. It's going to relax the tissues a lot more and make a bit more space if the space is tight for the baby, and that's why they're stuck there. And then to just have time with movements. So, you know, resting wisely in that early stage of labour with movement when they feel like it. So if they're feeling like they want to be active, you know, get them moving around. If they're feeling like they want to rest, then just turn them, you know, in that resting wisely, just turn them over. Yeah, and just keep an eye out. Usually when babies get into a good position, so something shifts, you get a change in the labour pattern. It's quite obvious usually. You know, there might be a bit of a pause, especially if it's been a long kind of latent phase where the body takes a bit of a rest, because it's like, oh, okay, the baby's in a good position now. I'm gonna have a rest and be thankful phase, and then I'm going to kick things off. Yeah, so if stuff is quiet, rest, because you know you've still got quite a way. And what it says, it's really important that if you're going and showing anybody something like a lift and tuck and the baby's in a good position and you do it and then you're going away again, just be ready to go quickly. Yeah, because when things pick up, it's probably going to happen quite fast. I had that with a mentee recently that she did some stuff to release the pelvis, taught them abdominal lift and tuck, went away, and she was like, oh, they've called me again, Shelley. I was like, get in the car now. And she got there 15 minutes before the baby came. They hadn't called the midwife, so the doula called the midwife, and the midwife got there 5 minutes before the baby came. So luckily everybody was close by. So yeah, it can, when the baby gets in a good position, it often can be really fast following. So yeah. So what were we saying? Yeah, inlet. I'm just trying to think where I was, what I'm talking about. Yeah, so the inlet, it's more about forward and backward movements. Yeah, tilting that pelvis. Okay, and also preparing the way. Yeah, so helping with the forward leaning inversion or knee chest position, releasing tight tissues, helping the baby, encouraging the baby to turn by using positions wisely. Yeah. Then when the baby's in the mid pelvis, okay, what we're trying to do is then encourage that turn. So they could basically, they can drop in pretty much any way. The camera, honestly. I think it's just getting to that right turn around. Okay, so they've come in quite flexed usually. My internet connection's unstable. Okay, because when they're emerging, they're going to have to extend under this pubic arch. They're going to have to extend their head. So they then need to really be facing towards the back. Is the ideal for most people. Obviously, some people can birth babies that are back to back. I'm just going to go with this terrible camera because I think it's just going to drive us all mad if it keeps. Sorry, I'm a bit blurry. Okay. So then the baby's got to extend around this pubic arch. So in that middle part where we're trying to help the baby to turn around to the right way, what we do is asymmetrical movements. Yeah, so we're trying to sort of like gap one side, gap the other side, just to give the baby space for them to be able to rotate and turn around to the right position, so that they can then drop down to exactly that right position, so then they can arch and come out. Yeah. So that's things like lunges. Lunges one side or the other, or maybe doing some kind of jiggling on one side, or perhaps freeing off if it's feeling tight on one side. There's some massage or some pressure into places if they're feeling a bit of tightness from one side or the other. If a baby, if a person is fully dilated, okay, and the baby's quite low and they're sitting in between these ischial spines, and they're not progressing, like they've got a really strong urge to push, they might have been pushing for some time, but nothing's really happening, the baby's descending, you know, it's like it's often likely that he's not in a great position. Okay, sometimes the part that they can see or they can feel is a bit of molding of the baby's head, a bit of kaput that's like trying to be squeezed down the birth canal, but it's not actually the baby's head. So in times like that, the best thing you can do is get the person upside down. Okay, so in a knee chest position, if they can't do a proper forward leaning inversion, or actually in a forward leaning inversion, because you need to get the baby back up away from those ischial spines so they can turn into the right position and then come down. Okay, because that's the kind of situation. Now, if a baby's stuck like this, really wedged in those spines, they're not going to be able to come out. And that's going to be sort of with, you know, they're going to have to manually turn the baby to be able to get them out. Okay, and if they can't do it with the instruments, then it's going to be a more dangerous cesarean, because the baby's already low, and what they have to do is then push the baby back up through the pelvis to be able to get them out with the cesarean. So these are the kind of situations where biomechanics really can save the day, you know, and prevent the need for things like this. But you have to, you know, often the person's really tired by that point, so you know, it's got to be a really informed decision by them, and just saying, look, this could work and mean that we don't need a forceps or a ventouse. Are you willing to try it? Does involve you getting upside down, you know, and us trying to just back the baby up a little bit so they can get space to turn. Okay, and so when I do this, I will get people fully inverted if I can. Okay, and then I would actually do like jiggling on the ischial tuberosities, like a good kind of jiggle, or like this, or with a rebozo, literally to help the baby to go back out a little bit so that they can turn and then come out again. And if you're at home birth, somebody been praying for time, like some places it's an hour, some places it's 2 hours, try to do this before you reach that time. Or if they feel that there's a malposition of the baby, say, okay, can we just try something and wait? If the baby's happy and the heart rate's fine, can we wait a little bit of time, okay, before we call an ambulance or before we transfer in? And I'm telling you that because it's a mistake I made with my last birth, and that I thought, oh, the ambulance will take half an hour. I reckon we'll put her upside down, we'll do some jiggling, the baby will move and it will come up before the paramedics get here. They got there in 5 minutes, got to the hospital in 15 minutes, baby came 5 minutes after we got to the hospital. So yeah, give yourself some time if you can, you know, if things are okay, because it might make all the difference for staying at home and not transferring in. Okay, let me just share this with you. So yeah, we've talked about what things can be helpful at the inlets, at the mid pelvis, and at the outlets. Yeah, and remember to make sure that there's space for that. So we all know that the worst possible position to put somebody into birth the baby is the lithotomy position. But of course, it's the favorite position for people in hospital because it's easier for them. So if you are in a situation where they're insisting on it, what you can do is use something to prop the pelvis up on one side, okay, like a cushion or a rolled up towel. So if you're propping the pelvis up, we're then allowing sacral movement, okay? So that it's kind of tilting, so effectively you've got the thing there, so I haven't got enough hands. The sacrum can then move a little bit out of the way. Or you can roll up a towel into a kind of U shape to go around, so you're effectively supporting the pelvis like that on a towel. So then there's more space for the sacrum to move. Also, if you've got somebody up in stirrups, okay, if you have got the, you know, if the legs are up in stirrups, okay, try to get the knees in. Okay, so up in the stirrups with the knee, because with the knees out and wide, it's going to close the outlet space and make it more difficult. Yeah, you can get, if it's comfortable for them to get the knees to come in, it could be all the difference between, you know, the baby being able to come out on its own without other help. So I think I've probably covered this a little bit as to why it's more helpful for babies to be a particular way around, but just to review again. So if the baby's on the left-hand side of the body, the uterus is more curved on the left-hand side, so this encourages the baby to go into a flexed position and to present that the tiniest part of the head. And remember, we've all tried it before, but we can do it again. If you are flexed over, okay, it makes you much more mobile to be able to move. And if everything is very extended, it makes it very difficult to twist and move. Okay, so this is the same thing for a baby. If they're flexed, they're much more easy. It's much more easy for them to navigate through the twists and turns that they have to navigate through the pelvis than if they're extended. It makes it much more difficult for them to move and shift. Okay, so it makes it more likely that they're going to get stuck. So that's why we want them on the left-hand side rather than the right-hand side. They've got more space as well. The right-hand side is you've got the liver there, which is quite a firm structure. You can actually feel your liver if you place your hands over your rib cage and like feel underneath. There's kind of a hard, smooth, you've got to flex over a little bit so your tummy muscles aren't tight if you've been doing your ab workouts. It make it more difficult, but there's like a kind of firmness there that is your liver. So it's quite a hard structure. It doesn't kind of squish up out of the way like the other abdominal organs do. So it just makes less space for a baby to be able to move about. The other unhelpful thing that is often told in hospitals is for people to flex over their baby, like curl up, tuck your chin onto your chest and push down. So let's all just have a little think about what that's doing to our pelvic floor, first of all. So if you can put your hands on your pelvic floor if you want to, or just kind of feel it at the moment. And I want us to take a really deep breath in, okay, and do a breath in where you're pushing out your belly as much as possible. Can you feel that when you push out your belly as much as possible, it also pushes down your pelvic floor? You feel a bulging in the pelvic floor. You push your belly out. Yeah. So now if we want to distend the pelvic floor a little bit more and make more likely a prolapse or a tear or more pressure on the perineum, what we can do is increase the pressure even more by flexing over. Yeah. So straight away when you feel that bulging your pelvic floor a bit more. Okay, we wonder why putting people in a lithotomy position, they end up with more severe tears. You know, that why there's that difference between home birth and hospital birth and freedom of position and lithotomy. Okay, because when you put somebody in a lithotomy position, you take their legs apart, you're externally rotating. What you're doing is stretching the pelvic floor with the pressures. Then you're increasing the pressure by bearing down, and it's just a recipe for tearing and disaster, basically. Yeah, to kind of release that pressure. And also it's just squashing the space for the baby, squashing the baby. They can't move. You know, it's just going to mean that they can't adjust and move. And it also means that we are changing. If we're flexed over like that, we're kind of curling and tucking under with the pelvis. So again, we're closing that space. Whereas if we arch the back, okay, we lift up, and you may see women often like reach up. Okay, this is opening the space for the baby to be able to move. It makes much more space for them to be able to maneuver. And we're also opening the space more naturally as you're doing that arch. Okay, making more space for the baby to come out. So they're all instinctive things that you've probably seen at births, you know, and that can give you an idea of where the baby is. So if you see somebody just kind of, you know, doing their sort of rocking, and then they suddenly just like somewhere, baby's probably in that mid pelvis and they're trying to get through. If someone's doing kind of things and then they're starting to really want to squat down low, okay, really nice low squats, that's going to be starting to help descend to the baby. Yeah, helping them to really drop into the pelvis as you go down into that squat. And actually, I think I shared an article recently in an email about a deep squat, and how actually it's the sort of last bit of movement of the deep squat that opens the outlet the most, not holding at the bottom point. So you can go and have a look at that article. A bit about baby positions. Okay, so understanding is key. If we know about physiology and anatomy, we can support the innate system that already works best for birth, and we don't have to do anything. We're just watching and observing. And with each person, we can learn a little bit more about the things that they're doing to help their birth, and it can give us clues as to things that might help if somebody's stuck and they don't know what to do. And if we can observe and start noticing patterns, we can tell when maybe something isn't quite right, and help early on. So you've not got a really long labour by the point that the person's really tired, they don't want to do anything, they're just giving up. And they're giving themselves over to whatever's going to happen because they're just feeling tired and desperate. Yeah. So we begin with balance, then we make space, then we use gravity, and we rest wisely, and always we're observing unobtrusively. Okay. I don't know if I've missed any questions. Did I miss anything? Anybody say? Okay, if the baby is right occiput anterior, what is the best move to send it to the left occiput anterior? Okay, so if a baby's on the right hand side, what can often help to them to move over onto the left hand side is actually to do left lying positions. So you can lie the person on the left hand side, maybe do a sideline release on the left hand side. Yeah, or you can get them on the left, maybe put their leg up on a peanut ball and do some rocking on the peanut ball. Yeah. I would also check to see if there's any kind of tightness. So you can do some massage, maybe into the back if there's tightness in the pelvis. And you can do kind of jiggling as well. It's always a really good one for releasing and relaxing. If a baby's not in a great position and somebody's in early labour, what's really great is to stick them in the bath. Okay, it doesn't matter if they're on their back in the bath, but the heat really helps the muscles to relax a little bit. And actually what they can do is once they've been in the bath for a little while and they've got the heat that's relaxing the tissues, they can actually just sway the hips from side to side, which can help. And it's easier in the water because they've got the support of the water, so they can like hold on to the, if you've got a bath with handles on the side, or in a birth pool you've got the handles. I know at hospitals they don't sort of let you in a birth pool until you're 4 centimeters, you know, all that sort of ridiculousness. Because if you're home you can. What's crazy is that actually the bath can be really helpful in early labour if there's a problem, you know, to help the baby to move, because it's helping the you know, the person to move more effortlessly. So I can't speak today because when you're on land and you're really pregnant and you're obviously at term and contracting, it's difficult to move around. It can be quite uncomfortable, but in the water it's much easier. And so it's great if you've got a, you know, if you're in a hospital and they'll let you use the pool, it can be really great. But if not, a bath. So you can hold on to the handles, and they can actually just dip the hip like one side to the other. I'm like trying to work out how to show you that with tricky. Maybe this way will be easier. So like under the water, dipping a hip side to side. This. Shower, well, you can get heat on the muscles, so it can help to relax them. You can use a hot water bottle or a heated blanket or something like that to get the warmth in. You could do a warming massage, maybe with some warming oils. The shower is obviously not as effective in terms of that it's not going to make the person feel so weightless, so it's more difficult for them to move. And the bath is really nice for that kind of hip swaying technique. But sorry, I've got hiccups. But you can do, you know, get warmth into the shower. Cinnamon and mustard, that combination, yeah, mustard's very warming. Yeah, no, yeah, well, yeah, cinnamon is good. Yeah, you can use oils, yeah, essential oils, yeah, something warming on the back, even if it's just some warm oil with a bit of lavender in, or a bit of clary sage if they fancy, if that's not contraindicated. It doesn't even have to be scented if people don't want scents. Yeah, ginger's a good one, I'm sure, yeah. Yeah, if people are not too sensitive to them in their skin. Yeah, because some people are really sensitive, aren't they? But yeah, in a carrier oil always, obviously, to dilute it. But yeah, that can be really helpful. Can't remember what I was saying. Oh yeah, I was answering your question. Does that answer your question, Grace? I've got a goldfish brain at the moment.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, does anyone else have any questions about what I've gone over so far? Anything that you'd like to ask about or add to? No? Okay. So, okay, so just to let you know, if you'd enjoyed today so far, and I'd like to sign up to my monthly sessions, you can go onto my website. So it's the serenitydoula.co.uk/plans pricing, and then you can choose either to come sign up to come every month to the lectures, or you can just come to one-off ones that you fancy. And if you've been one of my students, there's a discount code which I've sent to you in an email, so you get a significant discount. yes, so that's how to sign up. So and next month in December, the beginning of December, so it's let me just look up in the diary, because otherwise I'll tell you the wrong date. So yeah, Wednesday, December the 7th, I'm going to be talking about how breathing works. So the effects of different types on breathing, on the pregnant, birthing and postnatal body, and on our bodies too. So it's going to be really one where we're experiencing a lot of how it feels in our own body, so we can describe it really clearly to people that we're looking after, and to feel the difference in ourselves too. So a little bit like we felt that today. How we can best advise our clients about different types of breathing and when to use them safely and effectively. And also we'll have opportunity at the end to discuss cases and how we can use, maybe with the slant, and how we can use the breath or biomechanical discussions. So let's move on now to case discussion and questions. Okay, so remember, if you're bringing a case, just keep your clients anonymous, and just be respectful of medical professionals and each other, and hold a safe space to reflect on cases. Sharing openly in the spirit of learning and the sharing of wisdom, which I know you will do, because you're all doulas, so I don't really need to tell you that. That's just in case I had any other medical professionals in. So does anyone have any recent cases that they would like to ask anything about, or discuss, or talk about, or you've used biomechanics and it helped, or you weren't sure what to do, or
Yes.
Lovely, Joan, go ahead.
It just amazes me at births, home or hospital, how midwives have to stick to so many of their guidelines. I was at a birth 2 weeks ago, and the midwives had arrived before I did, even though I was 5 minutes away, but they phoned me a bit late, because the midwives turned up and said, literally at the front door, said, "You're not in labour. We've come too early. We'll be going again." And the woman was 6 centimetres dilated. So I came round, and in the half an hour, they had phoned the hospital to say we would probably need to transfer because she had high blood pressure. Now, they turned up at 3 a.m. in the morning to tell this woman at the front door she wasn't in labour and they'd be leaving. Her blood pressure probably went up as a result of midwives turning up at 3 a.m. Anyway, I arrived, she got in the pool, half an hour. The senior midwife that they phoned said, give her an hour, check her blood pressure again. And it was totally fine. Now, move on. This woman progressed fantastically. Midwives were pretty hands-off, etc., etc. She was fully dilated, and they gave her total peace for 1 hour. When the hour was up, they went into overdrive, and it was like, okay, you've been quiet too long. We need to transfer. Nothing's happening.
Was she wasn't pushing?
She was in the pool. She was in the pool, and she'd had the urge to push for a couple of surges, but then it all kind of tapered off, and she went into complete relaxation and rest and be thankful mode. And they just put the fear of God in her. They said, we're going to have to transfer because this isn't happening. And she was in the pool. She hadn't weed for like 5 hours. And I said to her really quietly, she was in the pool, I said, you're doing absolutely fine. You can make the decision. You don't have to go anywhere. But why don't you just get out of the pool and do a wee? She got out to do a wee and birthed her baby between the toilet and the hallway. They didn't have time to do anything. It was just the change of position got it all going.
Yeah,
and it
did she have her wee, Joan? Did she manage to get her wee or not?
No, she didn't.
Didn't even manage to wee.
Just the change of position. She was on the toilet and she started to bear down, and I said to her, you need to get off the toilet. And I said to the husband, get a yoga mat because we can't move. And she just kneeled down there and then and birthed. And the midwives, and they were both pretty experienced midwives. It just amazes me that their call to action is transfer. They don't want anything happening at home that doesn't tick all their boxes immediately.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't they just say to a woman who has been in the pool for an hour resting, she's fully dilated, just change position and see what happens? But no, they're saying we're going to transfer her to hospital.
Well, was there anything wrong with the baby?
No,
Any concerns over the heart?
Cord wasn't around the neck or anything. Baby did need a moment to kind of like come round because he was just very relaxed. And he was absolutely fine because it had all been so smooth.
Yeah.
And she didn't even have a stitch.
Brilliant.
They were gone 2 hours later. Everything was absolutely fine. But they just have so many things that they feel they have to tick so quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such a shame really, because that doesn't even really sound like it's within guidelines, because it, you know, really, if she's not been actively pushing at all, you know, laboring down, you're just waiting, the baby's heart rate's fine. Does there need to transfer? I don't understand that medical rationale at all.
Because she was a first-time mom, she could have 2 hours, but they expected some action in the 2 hours. And because we'd gone into 1 hour and past the 60 minutes, we've now gone into the second hour and they wanted some action. So it's like, well, where's the action? It's not happening. And she just was resting because this was 3 o'clock in the morning. It started, like seriously. And this was 8:30 in the morning. So in 5 hours, she went from starting her active labor to getting ready to birth. And she just needed a rest.
Yeah. And that's a textbook amount of time.
It is a textbook amount of time.
Yeah.
And these midwives were experienced midwives, but they were still very pressurized about their procedure. Luckily, at the other end of the phone, the senior midwife that they phoned a couple of times said, just give her more time.
Do you think they were desperate to get home? What? So it was 8 in the morning, did you say? So
they had done they had done 24-hour shift with 1 hour off. So they were exhausted.
Yeah, so they wanted to transfer in so that they could go to bed.
Yeah. And then 2 new midwives came at like 9:30 and did all the tidying up and wrote up the notes and everything. And, you know, there was no panic about anything. And it was the 2 that went off obviously were exhausted. But it just amazes me that they can immediately go, you're not in labor, we're going to have to transfer, we're going to have to do this, you're going to have to do that, you've got high blood pressure. And it's like, just give the woman a moment. They've come for a home birth. There's a reason people choose home births.
Yeah, that timing is a funny thing, isn't it? You know. And it, well, yeah, with the case I was saying about earlier, the baby was in an awkward position the entire way, and I could tell that the baby was not in a great position because the labor did take a while to progress, and she was having constant back pain all the time, not relenting between surgeries. And this lady
had constant back pain as well. Her labor was completely in her back right up until the last minute. And when she had her rest for an hour, the baby turned and literally slid out. Yeah,
this is the time when these things are happening. This resting to allow the baby to move is, you know, but it's not respected, unfortunately.
If it isn't respected, if you're in hospital and it's not respected, they end up in stirrups on their back. And I've experienced that so many times. 10 centimeters dilated, we arrive at the hospital and nothing happens, and then 2 hours later it's like forceps.
Yeah, never mind the disruption of physiology to get into the hospital.
Yeah. And thankfully this was at home, so and the plan was to stay at home. And she birthed without having any intervention apart from one vaginal examination, and didn't need stitches. And that's a first-time mom, and it is so rare nowadays.
Yeah, it's how birth should be, but unfortunately it isn't. Yeah. I'm very glad she had you there, Joan, to help her out.
I'm very glad that she chose in the end to have a home birth, because they tried even to, you know, alter that during the pregnancy a couple of times. But she had a consultant that said to her, go away and have the birth you want. So sometimes people are respectful of the choice, but procedures and policies take over.
Yeah, it's sad. The kind of cogs in the machine, just everyone gets trampled by it, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you
Anyway,
very much for sharing
yeah.
that with us, Joan. That was lovely, and really good to hear that you're. Let's just change position, a tiny change of position.
Yeah.
Straight away can help a baby. And that's the thing, it doesn't have to be anything complicated. If you're in a birth and you're thinking, I'm not really sure what I need to do, what movements are going to be helpful here, it doesn't matter. Any kind of movement, a stepping out of the birth pool is and a little walk around is often enough. And an idea to go to the loo is perfect, because of course the bladder might have been in the way. Obviously the bladder wasn't in the way because the baby came out before she managed to wee. But sometimes if someone hasn't been able to wee for a long time, actually sometimes an in-out catheter is helpful. And I have seen that where, you know, where the baby's head has dropped down maybe in an awkward position and it's pressing on the urethra, so the person's not able to go to the loo. You can try with peppermint oil on a tissue, or a couple of drops of peppermint oil in the bowl. That can sometimes help people to wee. Turn the tap on, give them privacy. Those things can sometimes help if somebody's stuck. But if there's a true mechanical blocking of the baby's head against the urethra, an in-out catheter can often be the thing that means that the baby can then come through. So
I was interested in your thing about looking at the feet because I do reflexology, and often I don't actually pay a lot of attention to the shape of the bump, but I think I will now.
Yeah, do. Yeah, and spend time with your clients. If they want to try and feel where the baby is, do it with them as a bit of fun, and say, you know, look, this is really difficult. Otherwise, get this wrong. But if you like, we can have a little, you know, we can have a little try. You can ask where the midwife last heard the heartbeat of the baby. So the heartbeat is loudest through the back of the baby. So if a baby is in a position where their back is towards the front of the mother, the heartbeat is normally stronger and easier to find. If it's more difficult and they're searching around, it's often because the baby is facing the other way, so it's more difficult to hear. So that can give you a clue if you've got a midwife there listening in for a heartbeat, and you can see which side of the belly that they're feeling things on as well. And yeah, feeling for bumps. If you've got a long smooth curve, that's the back. If you're getting lots of lumps and bumps, that's knees and feet and things. And ask the mum where she's been feeling the kicks or feeling any movements. You often, if a baby is back to back, they'll feel a lot of kind of scrabbly. Sometimes they even feel a little bit sharp movements down low in the pelvis, and that's the baby just taking their hands towards their mouth and just you know, if they're upside down, they're sort of scraping around here, around the inlet to the pelvis. So often people will describe that kind of a feeling if the baby's around that way. Yeah. And you can see which side, and you can feel it. And when a baby is you can tell heads and bottoms are difficult to tell apart, okay, because they both feel quite firm. But if you move a bottom, the whole back will move. Okay, so you'll get a movement of the whole thing, so you can sort of put a hand on and feel when you move it, whereas a head will move more independently and have more movement. Yeah. But you know, it's just a thing for fun. You're not necessarily trying to diagnose anything, but it can help to give an idea if you've not got somebody there and they want to have a little feel. They may be able to tell you. Some people are really connected and feeling their babies all the time and know which way around they are. And that's something I try to encourage in my clients, because it can empower them really to feel more connected with their baby and know really that they know more than other people, you know, because they do really. Yeah, oh, that's lovely. Thank you, Joan, for sharing that with us. So yeah, if I tell you a little bit about, unless anyone has anything else they want to share first, I can talk you through a recent birth that I was at and just give you some signs and things that you could look out for that might be helpful for you in the future. Just trying to think. don't think she had rupture of membranes, actually. There was a spontaneous rupture of membranes happened later. So she was having kind of quite a long latent phase of surgeries that weren't particularly strong, that she was able to kind of do things through for about 24 hours before things started to ramp up and they called me. I had a feeling that something was going on, and I messaged to check they were okay. And she said, "Oh yes, I've been having contractions since last month." What happened to tell me when you when the first signs are in, it goes out the window, doesn't it? I think they don't want to bother you. I was like, oh right, okay, thanks for letting me know. So yeah, and then I went over because they felt like things were getting a bit more serious, they were getting a bit more difficult to cope with, and so they wanted me to come over. So I did, and actually I think the mum was kind of a mind that she'd quite like to free birth, but the husband was very nervous. So it was all like they were under the home birth midwifery team, but we were waiting to when they felt that they wanted to call, or you know, anyone said, is it time? Should we go? So what she was having was quite intense contractions when they happened, but then quite big gaps. Okay, so when you get quite intense and then quite big gaps, that can be a sign that the uterus is trying to turn a baby that's not in a right position, or you can get double peaking. So she was getting that too, where she was getting two really close together, or maybe a contraction that kind of seemed to be going on for a really, really long time, like over 2 minutes long and quite strong that entire time. So it wasn't really kind of peaking and going down, but she was getting this kind of strong one, and then it just fell off. So there's the kind of signs that the body's trying to maneuver the baby into a better position. So we did a forward leaning inversion and a bit of jiggling to try and release everything off. And when she came upright, things started to go. She had a few more kind of intense surgeries that went a little bit more, and then that slowed down again. Okay, so then we thought, okay, the baby was in a left side position. We could feel that the baby was there. So okay, the baby's in a good position, but she's getting this back pain. So I was thinking in my mind, I think that the baby's in a good position, but maybe the chin's not tucked. You know, maybe we've got some kind of extension going on, and the baby's pressing into the back. Yeah, so that because she was getting a lot of back pain that was there kind of all the time. So I was thinking, okay, well, I think maybe here an abdominal lift and tuck is going to be helpful, because we're going to try and help the baby to tuck the chin. Okay, so she did that for 10 surgeries, and it seemed to work. You know, she started to get more intense contractions. They started to build in a bit more of a normal pattern, and then went on for a while. And then it started to slow down again, and she was this whole time getting this really bad intense back pain. So we did some more release stuff, so just some kind of jiggling underneath the ischial tuberosities with a rebozo on one side and then the other, and she actually was finding that standing was more comfortable for the back pain. She had a hot water bottle on her back almost the whole time, and then I had her sitting on her husband's lap, so that she could kind of relax her pelvis, relax the pelvic floor. So she was sitting and leaning over him. So she was sort of leaning over his shoulders, and in a kind of nice deep sort of, you know, basically like a deep kind of squat like this, leaning over her partner. And that really intensified the contractions, and you know, she started really to get into more active labor with that, and you know, even started to have some kind of involuntary kind of pushing sounds. So I was thinking, oh, okay, we're definitely getting somewhere here. And we switched between that, and she went into the pool for a while, and then stood up for a while. And when she was starting to get a bit more regular involuntary pushing sounds, I asked if she wanted to have the midwives there, that if they were thinking that they would like the midwife there for the birth, it might be a good time to call, because I knew they were an hour away. And they both decided that they did want to call the midwives. So we did, but then when we were waiting for the midwives to come, things slowed right back off again, and she was still constantly having this really intense back pain. And I was just thinking, I don't think this baby's back to back, because I can see the back is at the front, we can feel it. When the midwife came and she was listening to the heartbeat, she was like, no, the baby's definitely on the left hand side, and definitely she's facing the right way. But we weren't really quite sure. And then she got in the pool because she was starting to have more pushing, and she was pushing really, doing good, effective, self-directed pushing. Nobody was interfering. She didn't want to have any vaginal exams or anything, and she was pushing for a while. And I was starting to think, okay, this has been quite a while now, and I'm not seeing, the midwives kept looking in and not saying anything, and I was thinking, I would be thinking we might see a baby by now. Then we got a little bit of poo, and me and the midwives, of course, got very excited about that. And then, but then still nothing. And I was thinking, and I said to her, do you want to try moving and changing position a little bit? And she was like, no, not really. She's in the pool with a hot water bottle because her back was so uncomfortable. She just didn't really want to move. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to leave it for a while. I'm thinking, well, maybe the midwives are going to say something, because surely we're clocking up to close to 2 hours and they're going to want to do something. But they were just kind of being very chill in the background and not saying anything. So eventually I just indicated to one of the midwives that I wanted to have a word with them, because I was like, you guys might be happy to sit here with nothing happening. The baby was very chilled out. They were listening in every so often, but I was thinking, this is, something's stuck here, something's not right. So I spoke with the midwife, and actually she was probably the best midwife I've ever worked with. She was absolutely amazing, really good with informed consent, was happy to talk to me outside of the room so we didn't disturb her, was really happy that we were talking, that the husband or I was speaking to the mum and saying, can the midwife listen in? Does that feel okay? So that she was really felt safe and in her zone. And I said to the midwife, I think it's helpful for us to know where the baby is right now and what position the baby's in. And the mum had felt inside her vagina, she said, I could feel the baby's head, I could feel her hair, and she thought she was like about this far in, because I said, how far up do you feel you put your finger in until you felt the baby? But I thought it would be helpful for the midwife to have a feel to let us know what way around the baby was. So we went back in and asked the mum, and she was really happy. And guess what? The midwife was like, I can do it in the pool. I can have a feel in the pool with her on all fours. Oh my God, how wonderful is that? I nearly got this midwife and kissed her and said, oh my God, you're amazing. So yeah, we checked in with the mum, and she was happy too, because she was feeling the baby wasn't moving. She said, I don't feel the baby's moving down. I think it's going to help to know where we are. So the midwife did, with her on all fours, did a little bee, and guess what she felt? Lips. She was like, I feel some lips. This baby was coming down face first, and the midwife felt the lips. She said she wasn't sure if it was lips or an eye, but basically the baby was coming down face first, which is exactly why this mum had this constant back pain, because that baby's like basically coming down in the widest possible position. Now, the mum was very relaxed, had done all of her hypnobirthing, so even though the baby's neck was fully extended and in a really awkward position, baby's heart rate was absolutely fine, good variability, no decelerations, and was very low. There's just no way she was coming out beyond those ischial spine. She was just stuck there. So of course, unfortunately, the midwives then panicked. We've got to transfer because it's a face presentation. We can't deal with this at home. Me thinking, okay, well, they're in their mindset that they're going to be panicked. But if I put her in a forward-leaning inversion, we jiggle the baby back up a bit, the baby will tuck and be able to come out, because she's in the right orientation. She just needs to be able to have the space to get her chin tucked. So I'm thinking, yeah, the ambulance will take half an hour, I'll do this, we'll jiggle, we'll get her the right way up, the baby will just pop straight out, because she was really good with her pushing and everything. So but yes, unfortunately the paramedics turned up 5 minutes later. I said to her, go in the ambulance on all with your bum air, or worst case scenario on your left hand side. Paramedics obviously didn't like that, didn't want her to go in with her bum in the air, but they relented to let her go on the side. And when we got to the hospital, I followed behind in the car, but actually got there the same time as them, about a minute after or something. She said to me, the mum said to me, the baby's definitely moved, Shelley. Whatever we did, I can feel her, she's really well. And you know, the nutrition and the midwife were talking away, and she's pushing, standing up, and I'm thinking this baby's going to drop out whilst they're having a conversation about what they're going to do. So I was like knelt down with my hands underneath just in case, because honestly I could see the baby's head right now, she's going to come out. And this obstetrician's saying, oh well, I'm gonna need you to go on the bed on your back, you know, so I can feel where the baby is. And I said, look, you know, it's really uncomfortable for her because the baby's a face presentation to lie on her back. Can you not just have a look? You know, whilst I'm still there with my hands underneath because this baby's going to come out, could you not just have a look in this position, thinking, you know, there's a baby right there. Could you not just have a look? And do you know what she said to the mother? Well, it's easier for me if you get on the bed and lie on your back and put your legs still. This mum's been labouring for 48 hours. I don't think she really cares what's easier for you. Maybe you could just have a little look. Anyway, she eventually did just have a look. And she was like, the baby's right there. You don't need me. This is a normal birth, and left the room. Baby came out. So yes, biomechanics worked. Unfortunately, the doula didn't work enough. I should have just said, look, the baby's happy. I know we've been pushing for this time, but we didn't realise the baby was stuck. Now we know the baby's stuck. Let's give it, can we give it 20 minutes? Can we give it half an hour? Do something, change something, and see, you know. So in the future, I have learned from that, don't wait all the time. Yeah, after a while, if there seems to be no progress and the mum's feeling there's no progress, be more insistent about, okay, you're not feeling there's any progress, we need to change position, let's do something different, yeah, to see if it works. And it was really helpful in this case to have the vaginal exam, because just any old movement, like making a little bit of space side to side or moving the pelvis, was not going to be to get that woman upside down to move the baby back up so that they could tuck their chin. Yeah, there's no way just like a little bit of jiggling would have helped. I don't think. I think it really needed that kind of reset so the baby could then come down in the right position. But it worked, and the mum felt more comfortable afterwards, and she felt the change. Yeah, so that's all really empowering stuff for her, and she was really happy. She had her natural birth. She used no painkillers. She didn't even kill the paramedic who kept asking her if she wanted gas in there constantly. She didn't even hit him, so you know, she did really well there. Yeah, so that biomechanics, that work. There we go. So it did work, unfortunately not quick enough. That meant we still had a home birth, but you know, que sera, sera, whatever the saying is. Does anyone have any births they want to share or talk about or ask about, or something that happened and you weren't sure what to do? Jennifer, I see you've unmuted.
Oh, just thanks. I was just gonna say it's a great story. Thanks, and you shouldn't, you know, you did what you felt was right. So
yeah, I mean, the thing is, with every birth, I think we learn something, don't we? And I think for me, with each birth, I learned to be more confident about doing something, you know, because you know, I don't know if you guys get it. I mean, I've been a doula a very long time. What was it, 15 years? I realized that I'm terrible with years, but I found a picture of me and my first doula baby. I look like a baby myself. You know, still, when I'm in a medical environment and there are medical experts there, still I question, do I know more in the situation? You know, can I suggest something? I still do it even now. So
would you agree, sorry, would you agree it's so much easier in a home birth situation than a hospital situation to voice your voice as a doula?
Yeah, I think home birth midwives are more open to hearing your thoughts than medical staff.
Yeah.
And I think I have the advantage of having a medical background with osteopathic medicine, and that I speak medical language and anatomical language. So often people assume that I am a midwife or a medic when I'm speaking. So that helps to, you know, like push up the pecking order, as it were, because as doulas, we're like the lowest of the low, aren't we? We don't really, you know, they sort of, you know, we're like the dirt on their shoe, you know. So and it's doubly galling if we say something and then it works, you know, that's really annoying. I hate that.
Oh.
So which is a shame. That's which is why I tried to say it in a nice way, but could we maybe try this, you know, it might help, and it's worth a go. But yeah, I think each time it just makes me think, okay, if I had stepped in, maybe, you know, we never know, maybe it was the ambulance ride, because I did say to her, the ambulance have this suspension that's really kind of like, you know, so it's great for moving babies. If you're in a different position to what you were at home, often the jiggle of the ambulance ride just means that the baby comes out. So that, you know, I learned that from a previous birth where we tried things at home and they didn't work, and I was trying the forward leaning inversion, but the midwives were just coaching her to push. They were not experienced home birth midwives. So I was like, look, we need to try and back the baby up, because the baby was in that case facing sideways, stuck between the ischial tuberosities. And I was like, well, if we try a forward leaning inversion, we just need to back the baby up. But they didn't stop, like going push, 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 push. And I couldn't get them to be quiet. So of course, even though she was upside down, she was still forcibly pushing the baby down each time, because that's what she was being told to do. So it didn't give the baby the space to back up to actually move. So we did end up in the hospital with forceps for that baby. So yeah, even when you know lots of stuff, you still end up with instrumental birth sometimes. I have managed no cesareans, which I'm very happy about, no emergency cesareans or things, but you know, I'd like not to have forceps and ventouse if at all possible. So yes, I think we're there to advocate, aren't we, for what we think is right for our clients. And I think with each time I do something and it works, it gives me that much more confidence. So it's nice to talk about it. And for you, you know, if you do things, to talk with other people about it, so that it, you know, it builds everybody's confidence. And it also helps us to see patterns. You know, often this pattern of things kind of progressing really well and then not, you know, and that's often that the baby's stuck at those ischial spines and is not able to turn, or has sort of got themselves wedged if people are pushing when they're not ready. And this happens often with, oh, you're 10 centimeters, oh, we could start pushing now. Well, often you might be 10 centimeters dilated, but actually the baby hasn't had a chance to turn yet. And if you start pushing, they just get stuck then, you know, and then they can't turn. So really, I think it's great to avoid that sort of coached pushing, because it does, I think, end up with babies getting a bit stuck before they're ready. You know, they end up dropping down that bit more before they had the chance to turn the right way. Yes,
I had
I could. Oh yes, thanks.
I supported a birth back in May, and I contacted you, Shelley, because it was just so difficult, and she ended up being induced, but the baby's heart rate dipped whenever she came out of the position where she was lying on her right hand side. The baby's heart rate was fine, but whenever she stood up or lay on her left side, the baby's heart rate would go up. And so she wanted to walk around and move, but every time she did, the heart rate changed. And it was a bit of a nightmare in the end. But I asked the midwives several times what position they thought the baby was in, and I don't think they ever got the right position either. So it just made it really difficult. And right at the beginning, she wasn't really having contractions that progressed at all. And so it just made it all very difficult. In the end, she really didn't want a cesarean. She ended up with forceps, but at least she didn't have the cesarean. But all the way through, she said, I've spoken to her since, and we've been for coffee and things, and she said it was a very, very difficult birth, and it was a difficult time, she said, but I would not say I was traumatized by it. It wasn't traumatic.
That's because you had you.
Yeah, well, I tried loads of stuff, but I was just hampered by, one, I don't think the midwives knew the position of the baby properly, and two, just her not being able to move around very much.
Yeah,
Shame
there's
the
a trouble
other-
with monitoring, isn't it? That
Yeah.
you know, the monitor then stops picking things up, and the monitor is God to them in the medical setting, which is unfortunate because there's so much evidence that shows that it doesn't help outcomes, it doesn't reduce cerebral palsy. All that monitoring does is make a cesarean more likely. It doesn't improve things at all. It's unfortunately that false sense of safety, that you think that if you're monitoring something it makes it safer, but actually what makes it safer is the mother being able to listen to her instinct to move the way that she needs to move, and it really monitoring really gets in the way of that. Yeah, I've had that so many times where it's like, no, we just need you to stay on your back because the monitor doesn't work when you go on all fours. It's like, well, the monitor might not work, but the mum and the baby work in that position, and which is more important? And unfortunately for the medical staff, the monitor is more important. But
Yeah.
yes.
And do you know why when they have an epidural and they get to 10 centimeters, they just sit them up and leave them for an hour?
Yeah, well, because the contractions work to move a baby down if you don't mess about. So they've actually shown that labouring down time is like Monty Python crazy. Yeah, it's like farcical craziness. Yeah, so they have actually, this is actually a good evidence-based thing. So when they're sitting people more upright, obviously that means that gravity is going to help for the baby to drop down. So with the contractions, it is actually helping the baby drop and trying to give them time to turn a little bit. I actually heard that there was some research recently that showed that actually if you even wait longer, so don't like force pushing after the first down, actually probably what will happen is the baby will come down even more. And quite honestly, the longer you leave somebody alone before you start coaching their pushing, the more likely the baby is going to get close to the exit. And then really it's just about if the baby's being squashed in the vagina, you know, when they're really low, the heart rate obviously goes down a lot more with each contraction because they're really getting compressed by the structures then. And so for people who are naturally pushing, you know, they're not being directed, they won't push through an entire contraction. They definitely won't hold their breath and push for more than 5 seconds. Okay, because these things start to become detrimental to the baby and to the mechanics of how the blood flow is going through the placenta. So if you do prolonged pushing, so I'm going to talk about this more in the lecture next month, but if you're holding your breath and pressing down and squeezing down with the Valsalva for long periods of time, it really stops that placental blood flow to the baby. And it makes the baby more distressed. And what naturally our contractions do when they're not augmented with syntocinon, and we've got the feedback mechanism going on that unfortunately is blocked very much by epidurals, is that if a baby is struggling a little bit with the compression that's happening during contraction and the push, the mother is more likely to have more spaced out contractions. Okay, so it gives more recovery time for the baby in between surges, and the baby's heart rate will go up to reoxygenate. Okay, and then before it settles back down again. So that's why you can get these sort of peaks and troughs. A sign when a baby's really in trouble is if their heart rate's going very low during a contraction and then going really high afterwards. And a prolonged period of that is not good. Yeah, so that's when you would want to try and get the baby out faster. But they've shown that, you know, that this kind of coach pushing doesn't actually shorten the length of time that it takes for a baby to come out. But what it does do is increase the chance of perineal trauma and increase the chance of fetal distress. So, I mean, hopefully that'll eventually filter down. And though we might know it, it's difficult to be able to do it in a birth space when you've got people going, push, push, push. What I tend to do if I am in that situation with a mother is just get really close to them and say, people are going to start telling you all kinds of things in a minute. They're going to start going, push, 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 you know, push now, hold your breath, tuck your chin onto your chest. But what I want you to do is listen to your body, because you are the only person in your body. You are the only person that knows what's going on, and you just do what feels right for you. And that's all you can do. And I just keep reminding them when someone's like, push, push, hold your breath, put your chin under your chest. I just very calmly and quietly in the ear of the mother, remember to listen to your body and do what feels right for you. Yeah, and they can drown out all the cackling in the background of nonsense. Yes, yeah, I did have a client recently with a lot of that was a VBAC. So they were like, well, we have to have you on the monitor. And I'm I'm afraid it was one of those days where I did not have my best doula cool. I was like, well, she doesn't have to be on the monitor. That might be your policy, but if she doesn't want to, she doesn't have to. And it doesn't really increase the safety, does it? No, it doesn't increase the safety for the mother or the baby. It's just for you to keep an eye on things. So she doesn't have to have it on if she doesn't want to. Yes, they didn't like that. They also didn't like the fact that they were like, hold her leg wide, you know, when of course they got her in the bloody stirrups. And they're like, hold her leg up like this. And I was like, I'll only hold her leg up if she asks me, because that's not helping her. You're making the outlet space smaller. Do you know what the midwives did? They looked at each other and did this. The mother saw it. She's like, they're rolling their eyes at you, Shelley. I was like, yes, I know. That midwife also told me, I was like, do not cut the baby's cord. Mum wanted optimal cord clamping. And this was just, oh my God. So they didn't like the heart rate of the baby because basically the monitor kept slipping off. So they were worried about nothing. The baby was absolutely fine. The baby came out a really good colour, really good tone. He didn't cry because the mum was very calm and the baby was quite chilled. He just came out and was kind of wriggling around. Perfectly good colour. They'd had the paediatrician in the room for 20 minutes and he stood by the resuscitator, didn't even introduce himself to the mother, didn't even say hello, who he was, just stood there on his phone, not talking to anybody. Like, I think he barked something at the midwives and then stood there. And so they're trying to clamp and cut the cord of this baby that's perfectly fine because it needed to go and see the paediatrician. I was like, the paediatrician can walk the 2 bloody feet from the resuscitator to look at the baby on the mother. And they ignored me. And the midwife was like, I'm milking the cord. That's the same thing. Milking a cord is not the same thing as letting it pulsate on its own. It's absolutely not the same thing. It's really dangerous and shouldn't be done unless there's some sort of emergency. And they bloody well did cut the cord and took the baby to the resuscitator. The paediatrician went, the baby's fine, and gave it back. No, this kind of, it boils my blood, makes me so mad. What's the worst thing you can do when a baby's distressed? Cut off their only oxygen supply and make the situation worse. Actually, Grace, I'll tell that story that Nowly told. It's Grace and I went to the course with Nowly Vinever, who is a traditional Mexican midwife, amazing woman. If you ever get a chance to do any of her courses, I highly recommend it. She's wonderful. And she told this amazing story about a cord, pulsing cord. And she'd never seen anything like it. And she said, if I had never seen it, I wouldn't believe it. So they had a birth. I think everything was fine. I might be telling the story wrong, Grace, but everything was fine. Baby was there, breathing really fine. They'd left, you know, for optimal cord clamping because that's what she does as standard, because she has a brain that she uses to realize that it's a helpful thing. And then mum was cuddling the baby, and then suddenly the baby started making a funny noise, kind of like, and you know, started going a little bit of a funny color. It was obviously not getting air in, and so they sort of handed the baby to Nowly, and she was having a look, kind of patting the baby, giving them a bit of a rub, and she said the baby just sort of went like did a kind of swallow, and all was back to normal. But in this interim time where the baby was obviously sort of choking, not breathing very well, Nowly said the cord, which had gone white and wasn't pulsing, started pulsing again. You could feel that it was starting to pulse again. So she was thinking maybe there's some kind of neurological thing, you know, connection going on in the cord, that it started to pulse again because the baby needed the oxygen. And when she went to visit them the next day, the color changed. Yeah, it started to almost come back to life and start working again, because it realized that the baby needed oxygen. Absolutely amazing. I mean, I don't know what the mechanism for that is, but I'd be really interested in a study. It'd be fascinating. And when she went back the next day to visit the family, the father was like, we found the reason for what happened. We found the reason. Come look, come look. And he was really excited and showed Nowli the baby's nappy, and in with the meconium poo there was a bit of the membrane, of the amniotic membrane. So the baby had obviously swallowed a bit of membrane, and it momentarily just blocked the airway, and that's why the baby sort of like started to, and then it swallowed and it gone past the trachea, past the opening, and was absolutely fine, but it had gone straight through the digestive tract, and they saw the next day. So yeah, don't cut those cords, leave them until after the baby's feeding. You know, when the baby's fed, that's a real trigger to the placenta that the baby's capable of breathing well on their own and feeding, and there's absolutely no rush. Yeah, at the last birth I was actually the mother, you know, we talked about optimal cord clamping, and she was absolutely amazing at advocating for herself in that period. There is neurological tissue in the placenta. Yeah, I think, yeah, it's really cool. And they were like, okay, let's get the Syntocin on ready. And the mum was like, no, thank you. I just want to wait and see. She was absolutely brilliant. Like, should we cut that? Let's clamp and cut that cord. No, thank you. I'd just like to wait a little bit longer. This midwife said, we have to clamp and cut the cord before the placenta's delivered. No, you don't. And I was just about to go, no, you don't. And the mum said, no, you don't. She was super. You'd think she'd been doing antenatal sessions with me. It was brilliant. Yes, exactly. Scream, leave them alone. Leave them alone. I'm just trying to think if there's any other biomechanical things I can talk to you about that might be helpful. Oh yes, I did have a mum who she was a refugee mum for Happy Baby, actually. So I went at the last moment. She wasn't going to have a doula, but then I think she got to the hospital and decided she really did want somebody with her. So and I just happened to be 5 minutes down the road, which was really helpful. So I went, and the doula mentor who had spoken to her said that she was really thought she was about to have the baby, and she said, I think to be honest, Shelley, you might not get there in time. But when I got there, she wasn't even on the labour ward. She was upstairs in the antenatal ward, and she was in excruciating pain because the baby was in a bad position and just pressing down onto the front of the pubic symphysis, and they just left her. They were just talking and they just left her to it. She was really in agony, and we did some abdominal lift and tuck, and the baby just after 3 contractions, she was then like starting to push. So I was like straight away had to get, so literally just 3 contractions, we did an abdominal lift and tuck, and the baby, she went from excruciating pain to I was like, okay, I'm just gonna get the midwives. So that worked really fast, really quick. So that's a nice one. Nice and simple and easy, and shows how quickly sometimes things can just suddenly work. Okay, does anyone have any other questions they want to ask, or otherwise I'll let you all go off to beddy buys. I hear my husband yawning in the background.
That was brilliant. Thank you so much.
You're most welcome.
That was lovely, Shelley. And actually, it's nice to see you, Sally. Again,
yes, hi, Grace.
I've met you before, and obviously we know now where it was. So.
Yes, it was lovely to see you again. Really nice. I can't hear this sort of thing enough, really, because every time you talk or you experience it and the biomechanics, and you just keep learning and learning, and you hear something different every time. So yeah,
I think it's so helpful, and I'm really hoping that that we'll get more and more people coming, and that we can all share stories and all share things that went well, things that went not so well, and also just a space to share experiences, because I know we all go through a lot of the same thing, and we see a lot of the same awful stuff, and it can be very lonely and very hard being a doula, kind of being up against it all the time. And though it's not nice to know that other people are going through the same thing, in a way you can just think, oh, thank God it's not just me that's like trying to fight people off clamping cords and, you know, separating mums and babies and, you know, putting people in stirrups and all that kind of thing. It can just help you to feel like, okay, no, I am doing the right thing. I'm not the only one out there fighting the good fight. So I'm very grateful that you're all out there, and thank you very much for your time and spending the evening with me.
You know, I wanted to say something quickly, you know, Shelley, because as Sally said, the more we expose to this, better it is. Because, you know, before I used to think, oh, you know, if the baby's back to back, I need to try and give, you know, some jiggle, lift the belly, go like that, pull like now, flip pancake, whatever it is. And actually, there are some babies that favor back to back, isn't it, Sally, that we came to find out. And maybe if it's back to back, it's back to back, and just leave the mother be sometimes. And it was nice to hear that, actually, rather than being so panicky, like thinking that I had to do something to help this woman or any woman.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we can help during pregnancy to make sure that the spaces is open and you know, as flexible and as strong in the right places that it needs to be. And I'm going to talk more about that in lectures in the future. So that we can create the space that is right for the baby, and then they'll choose their path. And I think it's really watchful waiting to see what's happening and watching what a mother's doing to give us clues as to where the baby might be. So if things are not progressing, we can offer help, but often realize that we don't need to, that she already knows, or they already know what the right thing to do is, and the baby already knows as well. And actually by interfering, sometimes we can make things worse, just like other people interfering, you know. And that really this kind of knowledge of stuff is helpful, actually, to kind of give us an idea of how things are progressing. But often, most of the time, we don't need to do anything at all. It just clues us up as to where the person might be. And often, probably you recognize already, even without kind of knowing biomechanics stuff, where a woman is in her labor or where a person is in their labor better than the medical staff, because you're not relying on machinery and, you know, things that go ping. You're watching what they're doing and the movements they're making and the sounds that they're making and all that kind of thing.
That's true, but I had a mom that she was contracting every 2 minutes for about 3 hours, and then everything starts spacing like 3, 5, 10, 20 minutes. And I was 100% sure this mother must be like really well dilated. And finally, she didn't have any vaginal examination to that point, and then she said, okay, fine. And it was a home birth, and she was only 6 centimeters dilated, and she was contracting for every 3 minutes for about, I think, a good 3 to 4 hours, and then every 2 minutes for good 3 hours. So I was like, surely this has progressed really well. Actually, it didn't. That was like one of the few times that I think I was wrong to think, oh, I can read all the signs, but actually it wasn't.
Yeah, so what that probably was just that the baby was not in a great position. So that intensity was the body trying to turn. So then when you get that gap, that then tells you, the body was trying to get the baby in a good position, and now everything needs a rest before it ramps up again. So yeah, often you can't tell until there is something different that's not quite right. Yeah, so you know, that's very true. You're not going to get it right all of the time, but that gives you an idea now that if you see that pattern again where things are ramping up and then they suddenly stop, you think, hold on, maybe the body was trying to get the baby into a position there. Maybe something wasn't quite right. Maybe something shifted, and now we're having a bit of rest, and then just see how the pattern goes from there.
But she was transferred, you know, Shelley. It took a long time for her to give birth after that in hospital.
Yeah. So was the baby in a bad position?
No, but when the baby tried to do that restitution, it took a long time also. So the baby came out and then stayed there with the head. So the doctor came in and said she actually literally almost turned the baby's head for the baby. And I don't know if the mother was tired or the baby was, God knows what happened, but you could see that almost everything felt a little bit small for the baby to come out.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if she'd had a lot of intense labour, the baby probably was quite tired and not really wanting to move. And sometimes when babies come out and they don't restitute, and like if their chin's like this, kind of really squished in, it can be a sign that the shoulders are a bit stuck. Yeah, so often they do need a little bit of help there actually. So with the doctor helping the baby to turn, that can then get the shoulders presenting in the right way to hopefully be able to come through. So yeah, they may have had a bit of a
Distortion.
yeah, and was she on her back?
At that point, yeah.
Yeah.
At that point. So
Yeah.
like it doesn't matter if you're in home births or hospital births, when midwives want to just try and hurry up things, they will. And as you just said, they will just do it wherever place they are. If they, especially if they're tired, like the story of Joan, just try to make everything go faster somehow when people are not ready.
Yeah, it's true. Sorry.
Would putting the knees together have helped in that sort of situation?
Yes, it may well have done to make a little bit more space. Yeah.
Yeah, her legs were wide up like these, Sally. Like her knees were her foot were on the bed, but her knees were wide up. Like she was like like that.
Yeah,
almost like doing a butterfly.
Yeah.
So if you're doing that, if you're taking the legs really wide, of course that's gonna it's gonna narrow that space a little bit. Yeah.
Good point. Very good point, Sally. Because as you just said, you forget these things, and then just.
But also, I think you feel powerless, and as Shelley was saying earlier, you're in a room with all these people, and your little voice pipes up. How about? And I just don't have the confidence to do that.
No, it's very tricky. Do you know, so even I was at the birth and there were so many midwives in the room. I don't know what. I think it was a teaching hospital, and they were I think there were at least 6 or 7 midwives in the room for this mother, and at some points not a single one of them was looking at her. They were all looking at the monitor with their back to her, and she and I, it was another refugee I was supporting, and she and I were like looking at each other just laughing, like, who's giving birth here, the machine or the machine or the mother, just not looking at her at all. And then when it came to pushing, of course, again they had her on her back, blah blah, and she and they wouldn't let her move at that point, because it was this really weird thing. It happened very fast, and they kind of just forced her into having an epidural, even though they're going, she's not coping, you're not coping well, are you? Let's give you an epidural. She was just making transition noises, and I don't know actually if they even put any medication in for the epidural, because the baby was coming out whilst they were trying to do it. And I was just a bit like, this is not, she doesn't need an epidural. Why are you trying to convince her that she does? So then they were like, no, she can't, she has to be on her back. There might be some epidural medication in there, she can't change positions. And so one of the midwives was trying to get her to pull on something, and to sort of try and get a bit of counterforce, which can be really helpful. But one of the other midwives, it was like too many cooks for, I don't like this, and she was like trying to get rid of the stuff. So midwives, sometimes if the team is not cohesive, they're fighting with one another in the space, and also you see it between obstetricians and midwives too. So I can completely understand, exactly, the egos get in the way. So I can completely understand not being able to speak up, and that's where doing stuff in antenatally really helps. And when you're supporting someone at home, and it's really sad when midwives are against this. It's really sad. When you're at home, to really advocate for changes of position, so that in early labour she's tried different things to see what's comfortable and feels helpful, to give her the confidence to move and to do stuff antenatally, so that she's tried different positions and felt how they feel, so that if you are suggesting something in labour, it's not something new. You know, you're not saying let's try getting upside down here. If they've never done it before and they're they're in the fourth rows, they're not going to be interested. If you've talked about it and you've tried it and she's felt that she feels better when she does it, or when they do it, you know, in antenatally, then they're more likely to be able to do it in labour, and you're more likely you're going to catch something before it gets to like forceps, you know, 1, 2 stirrups and all that kind of stuff. And just to really hammer home, it is your body, your baby, your choice. If you don't want to be in that position, you don't have to be there. And if they're looking uncomfortable, I mean, they might want to be in that position, but if they're looking uncomfortable or the monitor's annoying them, just remind them, remember, this is a false sense of safety. This, you know, statistically is not making the situation any safer. If you want to change position, you can change position. You don't have to ask permission, you just do it. And I'll stand here and back you up. And you can also help to hold on monitors if they feel important. You know, if somebody wants to go on offers, they'll go, oh no, it doesn't pick it up very well. You say, well, I'll hold it.
Yeah, but the latest that has been happening when I've seen things is to try and put these electrode on the head. And I saw a picture on Instagram that's the midwife clicked somebody's bottom. So the baby was a breech baby, and she clicked the baby's bottom, and so the baby came out with electrode on the bum. And I actually mentioned to another midwife that contacted me about this, and I said, imagine if the baby was one of the lip babies and she decided to poke the baby on the eye or something like that, you know? Because if the baby's face forward, as you can see, it could have gone on the baby's face if she can't distinguish a squish bottom to a hard head.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and they're real. I mean, I don't know what statistics are. It's probably not particularly high, but the risk of infection, I'm very wary of those clip things, mainly because my husband's first daughter was an induction and eventually an emergency cesarean, and they did one of those clips and she contracted meningitis, and they're sure that it was the clip that caused the meningitis. So she's deaf from the antibiotics that they had to give her to save her life. So they're not, you know, it's not something to be taken lightly, those monitors. They might want to listen into a baby, but actually it doesn't improve the safety outcomes. So is it worth the risk? No. Obviously people have to make their own decisions about that, but you know, we can help make the space to say, look, you know, the evidence isn't great for this continuous monitoring. It doesn't actually necessarily make things safer. It's restricting your movement and your positions, which makes things more difficult for you and for the baby. It makes a bit more likely that the baby's going to be distressed. You know, they can listen in intermittently. It's as safe, you know, and as effective. They might not want to do it, but they can. Yeah. So I just missed that last comment. Yeah, well, it is a known risk factor for those fetal scalp electrodes. I'm not sure of the statistics of how often it happens, but it is a known risk. One of the side effects, which I'm sure they don't tell you about, because it's just a little clip on the baby's head, not a corkscrew. Just more what it's more like. Any other questions? I don't want to leave on that note. Give everybody nightmares. I've got to think of a good.
No, I was thinking, are we gonna celebrate Christmas here or something next month when we come back? It's like this note to the corkscrew. I was just like, oh.
We'll have a bottle of wine with us next
Christmas
time. So
wine.
we can end on a nice corkscrew.
Well, I've got 2 births coming up, and
okay.
It's the first 2 that I've actually helped to prepare them with, you know, sort of calf stretchers and rolling their foot on a tennis ball to sort of loosen the fascia, and just trying to prepare them, sort of, you know, jiggling and sifting and things like that, and I've shown the partner what to do and things. So I'm really hoping that, you know, when they actually go into labour, that these things will be familiar and that we can, you know, if need be.
That's very exciting.
it'll all be, you know, they'll have prepared the pelvis so that it will open more naturally.
When are they due, Sally?
Well, one's a shared care birth, and I'm on call for that at the moment. She's due on the 16th of November, but I might not. The other one, unfortunately, they want to induce her at 30th of November. So we'll see. She's due then. The baby was IVF, and she's over 40, so they want to induce her, but they're letting her go to a due date. So so we'll see. But I showed her the forward-leaning inversion, and she was, oh, I don't want to do that. I said, but just so you know that it's a possibility that if, you know, if something, you know, were to, you know, your pelvis wasn't to open, or the baby goes in the, you know, in the the least optimal position, then it might be an option that I'll suggest. But I wouldn't if, you know, you obviously don't have to do it if you don't want to, but
That's
just trying to sort of make them aware.
Get her to read In Your Own Time.
That's Sarah Wickham, isn't it?
Yeah, because those are not medical reasons for induction.
No, they're absolutely not. I've been reading up on it because I've always known that they want to do that, but yeah, and there's no evidence really around those two risk factors. So
there are actually more risks, Sally, for advanced maternal age to have induction. So it's actually more risky for them than for us. I'm saying I'm under 40. It's not true. But
yeah,
we're already in the geriatric category, Grace.
Oh, I'm well past that. I'm well 35. I'm well past that. Oh no.
You know, there are families that also they make their choice, because, you know, Shelley knows this, but I have a family at the moment that's they are 38 weeks. They went into hospital Thursday last week, and they said because they had reduced movement, so they measured the baby's bump that was measuring on the 50th centile, and they said to her, oh, we actually think that your baby is now measuring small, and they measured the baby like a week before. So she said, okay. And she said, so combined with your worry of, and they said exactly that, combined with your worry of reduced movements with this small size, we think you need to induce your baby right now, this moment. She was not even 38 yet. She was 37 plus 6. She was going to be 38 on a Friday. And so she went home, got all her stuff, and came back to being induced. So I explained to her, so what's about the movements of the baby? How is it going? And she said, oh, they said it's fine, but because they don't know how long the baby had reduced movements before I turned up in hospital, combined with the you know, the drop in size, I need to be induced. Anyway, she's been in hospital since Thursday night last week. She's still there with no induction. She's there.
That urgent induction.
Yeah, very urgent induction.
Yeah,
almost a week later. Tomorrow's going to be Thursday.
Oh, and probably no sleep in the hospital either, because it's so difficult.
She'll be absolutely shattered before she starts.
Yeah, it's just setting up for a disaster.
Mm.
Oh goodness, so frustrating, isn't it?
I have spoken to them, you know, a lot, and the husband said, I need to convince her. And I said, no, you can't. It's her body and her choice. You have to just let her be and support her in her decision. I've already explained to her in front of you, so she knows. And if you want to talk to her, just please don't undermine her decision. But she's 38 weeks now, and she's still in hospital. They've given her the gel already, and but they made sure to give us like one today, one the day after tomorrow, another like really spaced. God knows what they're trying to do to her. I'm not sure.
No, well, you know, if you've not got a favorable Bishop score, it's not going to work, is it? That's the thing. So what they'll probably do is hopefully get her, you know, what they're hoping for is her cervix to dilate a tiny bit so they can get a hook in and do artificial rupture of membranes, which of course then if she's not contracting, that'll then put the clock
The
limit
drip
on.
goes.
Yeah, the clock limit will go, and you know, she'll have 24 hours to get the baby out, or otherwise it'll be cesarean.
And they did all that with my client, and she got an infection.
She got an infection after the ARM.
Yeah, 24 hours later, they
So-
induced her with the drip, but she got an infection, and then that's why she ended up going in for forceps. They didn't allow the hour for the baby to drop down because it was too urgent by then.
Did she have fever in like she was not okay, she was not well, okay.
No, she had a fever. So,
No, well, because they gave her an infection by doing,
rupturing a membrane.
yeah.
I actually don't know what to say to this mom, you know, Shell and girls, because I don't want to upset her. You know, Shell, I've already discussed this with you.
Yeah.
It looks like she made her decision. And she said, I had it. I want this baby out, Grace. I don't really know what else to do other than sit down. Because I also haven't slept properly, as you know.
No, you won't.
What moment is she gonna call you then? When she's in active labor?
Yes. And earlier this afternoon, she sent me a message saying, I am third in line to go to labor ward. Even my husband said, why is she going to labor ward? You know, if she's not in labor. It's supposed to.
So they're already setting her up for syntocinon, aren't they?
And the
Just-
ARM, they won't do that unless it's on the labour ward, will they? They'll want her on the labour ward to do that.
So Grace, have you been to the hospital to see her at all?
No.
Yeah, because I've had two
I-
clients where that's happened, and sometimes they say to you, don't come, but I think sometimes I don't know how far it is for me, but there was one where I did go, but in the end, I think it was similar to what you're saying. I think she had just given up and was like, oh, I'm just fed up, I want the baby to come. So it was more like there was that whole kind of barrier to like get over how that she was now feeling at the time. And there was someone else who I went, even though they hadn't started to have the induction, but I just thought, let me just go there. And actually sometimes your presence there can just make them
change it.
Not all the time, like I've told you, one time it did, one time it didn't, but I think sometimes it's just a bit of reassurance because there's just so many people saying different things, and it can be quite, and for the first time mother, it can be quite confusing with all the information, and of course there's lots of coercion in the language that's sometimes used.
I should have called you, Yvonne, because she's not far. She's 20 minutes away. The hospital is about 20 minutes away from me. So
and all the different midwives will say different things as well.
Always, yeah.
My client had that. Well, you could just take a box of chocolates round or something and say, I've been thinking about you and I just want to give you a little treat and something for you, and that might help her to.
Oh, that's a lovely idea, Sally, because you know that will help
morning maybe if nothing happened, if nobody did harm to her tonight. Because I'm like every minute that I'm here, I'm wondering something's gonna happen to her.
Yeah.
It's so tricky when you're on the outside, isn't it?
Yeah, very.
My youngest is refusing to sleep.
Oh, this is just wanting to listen to the lecture, chipping in with some helpful advice.
Adding to the conversation.
Send kisses to her for me, Yvonne. But yeah, I will go in the morning. I'm gonna go in the morning, because thanks for saying that. I should have called you maybe. But, you know, I think I'm boring my friends when I call people to say the client wants to have an induction, because it's the client's decision, it's not mine to interfere. So
Maybe that's why you weren't going, because you felt that you weren't agreeing with her, so you didn't want to go in there with your opinion and your space
in my energy.
and your energy, so you just wanted to allow her to do what she wanted. So fair enough. Anyways, it's not going to reverse now. She's not going to walk out of the hospital, is she?
No, she's in the Hotel California now. She can't leave.
What's the Hotel California?
It's a song. It's a song. You should look it up. It's a great song. But it's like once you check in, you can't leave. That's what hospitals like, isn't it? You know, once you're in there, you can't get out again. It's very tricky.
But even you just going and just saying, you know, I'm here for you, whatever, and you know, it's your decision, just reiterating to her that it's her decision whether she chooses what you think or not, and I'm here for you, whatever you decide. And well, like you say, she's had the gel already, but you know,
Yeah, but
just
absolutely that'll help her power, you know, her to
And make
bring
her
the power
move,
back to herself.
maybe make her move a bit, make her get up, go for a walk. I mean,
She told me she's been moving all the time. She's been on the ball. She's it's like, please rest. Use these sort of meditations here. Watch some Netflix, you know, on your side. And she said, no, I'm okay. Don't worry. I'm on my birthing zone. And to me, like, birthing zone in a hospital. Okay.
Oh, let us know.
Yes.
Yeah, keep us posted.
It's lovely seeing you all. It's really nice seeing you all. I
Great.
miss seeing all of you. You know, thanks, Shelley, for organizing this once again. Like,
Yes, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you everyone for coming. I hope to see you next time. Let's get together and have some more chats, and yeah, bring your birth stories, bring your frustrations with the medical system, bring your lovely words of wisdom to share with one another, and let's keep looking after one another and keep learning from one another. Thank you very much, and
Thank
good night.
you.
good
Thank
night.
you.
Bye.
Night, everyone.
Good night.
night, night.
Good night, little one. Oh.
Night, beauty.
Bye.
Bye bye.